H.A. Musty was a pacifist who opposed U.S. entry into both world wars. He had a long history of activism and leadership in labor causes, in civil rights and war resistance, and was a strong proponent of nonviolent direct action. Musty died in 1967. The story is often told that a reporter encountering Musty outside of the White House asked him, "Do you really think you're going to change the policies of this country by standing out here alone at night with a candle?" And Musty replied softly, "Oh, I don't do this to change the country. I do this so the country won't change me." To be honest, if this were an encounter I was involved in, I have to admit that I'd likely play the reporter role. I am inclined too often to wonder how good our efforts are, what difference we can make when we are standing, as it were, in front of the fortresses of power. I want there to be something more obviously and immediately successful to do. I want to be able to measure the outcomes of my effort and to be able to see that I accomplished something. And it is this affliction that I am trying to address today. In preparing for today, I felt like I was grasping at straws for hope, looking for openings, little bits of light, any kind of wisdom that might help me, and potentially you, in trying to find a way through this time, or to put it into some structure of meaning. Try to figure out how to create a framework around this craziness that makes any sense, and it's not an easy thing to do. And multiple bits of songs and poems and writings from various sages came to me, and so I share these things with you. First, it was the old Frank Sinatra song, "High Hopes," that kept going through my head. Some of you probably are familiar with it. So anytime you're feeling low, instead of letting go, just remember that ant. Oops, there goes another rubber tree. Yeah, I can remember actually seeing an animated version in my childhood. It might have been on Captain Kangaroo or something, with an image of this little ant just trying to push over this huge rubber tree. I don't really know why the ant wanted to push over the rubber tree, but the message was that the impossible happens if we believe and keep trying. That was the message. Potential, success, and quantifiable achievements are really great motivators and inspirations. At least they are for me. But what if success is not the point? What if there's another goal entirely? What if thinking that success is even possible, which in this case would perhaps be a society of justice and freedom and compassion for all the time, everywhere, all the time, all places, always, justice and freedom and compassion, if that was the goal, what if that is a fool's errand? Where would that leave us? The lack of any or all of those things, justice, freedom, compassion, really is just suffering by another name. Suffering is the human condition, which is a reality wisely embraced by Buddhism and also well expressed by Ursula Le Guin in The Dispossessed, an Ambiguous Utopia. There she puts it this way, speaking of suffering: it exists. It's real. I can't pretend that it doesn't exist or will ever cease to exist. Suffering is the condition on which we live, and when it comes, you know it. You know it as the truth. Of course, it's right to curse diseases, to prevent hunger and injustice, as the social organism does. But no society can change the nature of existence. We can't prevent suffering. This pain and that pain, yes, but not pain. A society can only relieve social suffering, unnecessary suffering. The rest remains. Suffering will not go away, and we cannot fix it all. We are mortal, our lives are impermanent, which reminds me of Audre Lorde's poem, A Litany for Survival. It's actually in our gray songbook. There she claims that we were never meant to survive, that we were never meant to have an existence free of hard times and struggle. She writes, "And when the sun rises, we're afraid it might not remain. And when the sun sets, we're afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we're afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we're afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we're afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. Try as we might and then try again and again, we're still afraid and hungry and unwelcome and hurting and in real danger. And what are we to do with this reality?" Another song came to mind, this one from the civil rights era, Pete Seeger's "Keep Your Eyes on the Prize." Keep your eye on the prize. The chorus repeats, "Keep your eye on the prize, hold on." Keep your eye on the prize, hold on. Hold on, hold on. Keep your eye on the prize, hold on. Keep focused on the goal. Keep hoping, keep holding on. That's that message, that what we need to do in the presence of pain and suffering is to hold on and to don't give up and to never give in. And this is an answer, I think, maybe the only answer, to hold on and to keep going, to cry out like the prophets in the wilderness, to find and actually embrace that sublime madness within us that makes it possible, even when it seems hopeless, to hold hands and stick together, to choose to turn to love and light. Did you know that Leonard Cohen spent 5 years in a Zen monastery? There he wrote much of his Book of Longing, which is a collection of poems and drawings that talk about challenges to the human spirit. In there he writes, "In such periods, the most intimate and inward of human labors, that supreme instrument for magnifying the light between us and lighting up the world, is an act of supreme resistance. Love is an act of courage and resistance. In hard times, the best thing we can do is magnify the light between us and light up the world. To love is a supreme act of resistance." And then there's James Baldwin, here sounding a little bit like Audre Lorde, who searched for an antidote to dog our despair. He wrote this, "All love is light's battle against the entropy continually inclining space-time toward nothingness, against the hard fact that you will die and I will die and everyone we love will die, and what will survive of us are only shoreless seeds and stardust," unquote. All that stuff is true. You will die and I will die, and what will be left of us is stardust. But love is light's battle, a battle against both despair and chaos. What we need, whatever else is going on, is to know that there is light somewhere waiting to be found. And our lives depend not necessarily on finding that light, but on searching for it, keeping our eyes turned toward it, even when we don't see that things are getting better or maybe even are getting worse. The fact that we can't see it right now does not invalidate the fight for justice. Because, you know, indeed, if the arc of the moral universe is long, I mean really long, it's likely that even in our lifetimes, we may be unable to perceive that the arc is bending. And if this is true, then perhaps it is true that this calls for, in Niebuhr's words, that sublime madness in the soul. A madness that says, I will not give up, I will not try, I will never say, I can't. Even when standing before insurmountable fortresses of power, we must try. As Chris Hedges has said, I do not in the end fight fascists because I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists. And so I repeat some of his words that Shelley shared earlier because they're so important. Hedges said, "We may feel in the face of ruthless corporate destruction of our nature, our nation, our culture, and our ecosystem, powerless and weak, but we are not. We have a power that terrifies the corporate state. Any act of rebellion, no matter how few people show up or how heavily it's censured, chips away at corporate power. Any act of rebellion keeps alive the embers for larger movements that will follow us. It sustains another narrative. It will, as the state consumes itself, attract wider and wider numbers. Perhaps this will not happen in our lifetimes, but if we persist, we will keep this possibility alive. If we do not, it will die." Unquote. And so Audre Lorde ended her poem about survival with these words, knowing that we're going to die. "So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." It's better to speak, it's better to act, it's better to show up, even when we're afraid and hopeless. Because in showing up, in speaking, and keeping on, and keeping our eyes on that prize, we never know when we are the ones providing the light for someone else who just can't find it. That novel that Ursula Le Guin wrote, in there the idealistic physicist Shevik speaks publicly to an enormous crowd of his fellow anti-authoritarian socialists who've taken to the streets in furious desperation in the face of growing inequity and corruption. And Shevik says, "It is our suffering that brings us together. We know that there is no help for us but from one another, that no hand will save us if we do not reach out our hand. And the hand that you reach out as empty as mine is. All you have is what you are and what you give," unquote. So let us not measure our actions only if they succeed, but rather find our strength in our persistence and our moral courage. If at first we don't succeed, the only answer really is to try again and to keep trying, to keep fighting, to keep holding out our candles in the darkness, to keep loving, not because we will succeed in building the perfect world, but because what matters are the choices we make to struggle against the forces of evil and to hold out that light and love to each other. To choose otherwise is to fall into despair. To choose otherwise is to give up on life itself. I'd like to close with some excerpts from the statement that Renee Good's wife shared with NPR on Friday. After talking about their choice to move to Minnesota and all the hope and love they found here, she said this: "Renee lived by an overarching belief. There is kindness in the world, and we need to do everything we can to find it where it resides and to nurture it where it needs to grow. We are here to love each other, care for each other, and keep each other safe and whole. And we can honor her memory by living her values, rejecting hate and choosing compassion, turning away from fear and pursuing peace, refusing division and knowing we must come together to build a world where we all come home safe to the people we love." So, if here at First Unitarian, if at first we don't succeed, we persist in choosing compassion, pursuing peace, and coming together in love. May it always be so. So the song we are about to sing